Hello and welcome to yet another virtual event here with Tattered Cover Bookstore. We are based in Denver, Colorado. And what I love about virtual events is we don't all have to be in Denver, Colorado tonight. So thank you for joining wherever you are and tuning in tonight. If you need or want closed captioning, there's a button at the bottom of your YouTube screen that says CC. If you click that button, you'll get closed captionings generated for you. Tonight, we are celebrating Salma El-Wardany's These Impossible Things, her debut novel. She's in conversation with Destiny O. Birdsong. Destiny's writing has appeared in, I'm reading different bios. Destiny is a poet, novelist, and essayist whose work has appeared in the Paris Review Daily, African American Review, and Catapult, among other publications. Her debut poetry collection, Negotiations, was published in 2020, and her debut novel, Nobody's Magic, was published in February 2022. Salma is a white writer, poet, and BBC broadcaster. As a half Egyptian, half Irish woman, her work focuses on telling the stories of women, especially women of color, that have for so long been ignored. She has contributed to the anthology It's Not About the Burqa, and her writing has also appeared in the Huffington Post, the Metro, and she has given 2 TEDx talks. Salma and Destiny, welcome. Thank you for doing this with Tattered Cover tonight. Congratulations, first, Destiny, on your book from earlier this year, and Salma for your book that just came out. Congratulations to both of you. I can't wait to listen to this conversation.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. Salma, it's so nice to get to talk to you about this really lovely book. Did you want to read anything before we started? Do you want to just jump right into the questions?
Do you know what? You're the boss. So I just turn up and I will, for once in my life, Destiny, because I don't do this a lot, I will do as I'm told. So I'm so excited to be here with you and everyone that's tuned in. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm easy. We can dive straight in or whatever.
Let's do it. I'm nosy, so I love just asking questions. So, let's do it. So the question I love to ask, and I often love to answer because I think each story is slightly different and each story is different for each book. I want to talk about the day you realized that you were writing these impossible things. Like, what happened that day? What were you doing? How did you feel about coming to the realization that you were working on this particular book? I just, whatever details you want to share.
Do you know what? That's a good question, Destiny, because I would imagine, and if you have asked lots of people this question or you've spoken to other writers, I imagine they all have like such different realization points, right? Like it's not, and you know what, when people talk about like the writing process, right? There's part of me that kind of dies inside, and there's part of me that's like, I know that we're all just looking for this formula that will help and that will make sense. And there's no formula, right? And there's no formula to like when you realize that you're writing this thing. But this book had been in my head for a really, really long time. For years, it had sat with me. And I don't know if you've ever felt this, Destiny, but sometimes a book lives with you, within you, and it doesn't live anywhere else. And then it takes on, and it has, if you can manage to pull it out of you, which is no small thing, then it will live on a page, and then it will live with your editors, and then it will live in the world, and then it lives with the hands of all the readers, right? So it takes on all these different lives. And it just lived with me for a really long time, and it was in my head for a really long time, and I carried it around with me for many years. And I was dead set, Destiny, dead set that I was writing this novel. This book was going to be written. I knew it. But even then, I still didn't know really that I was writing it because I hadn't even started it properly. I hadn't put pen to paper. And I had sat with it for such a long time. And then I was talking to my agent one day and I said, realistically, when would you need this book for us to publish it in this year? And she went, next month. And so you have 30 days. And I was like, right, yeah, okay, fine. I'll get it to you at the end of the month. And then I sat down every day and I wrote 5,000 words every single day. I could not stop writing until I had reached that 5,000 mark. And some days it was 7,000 days. A couple of days of that month, it was 10,000 words a day. But when I was in that process, I knew I was writing it. I knew it was coming to life. And there were moments when I was writing, there were some nights, and you, of course, Destiny, you know this, as a writer, you have the rare night, maybe less so for you, more so for me, where it works and it's beautiful and the writing is happening and it's coming out of you. And then you have a lot of nights where you just bang your head repeatedly on your laptop or your computer and you think, why have I chosen this path in my life? And so, but from that moment when my agent said, I need it in a month, I need it by the end of the month, I knew that was, yes, this is happening.
Yeah, we were just talking about procrastination before we went live, and sometimes that's what I need. Like I need a hard deadline, right? And I need to be frightened
yeah,
to
you need to have the fear of God in you, so that you're like, God, what's gonna happen?
Yeah. I also love the idea of like having like a word limit. I had time limits for Nobody's Magic, so I would write for an hour or two a day, and then I would go work on something else.
How did that work for you? I'm just so curious. As in, did like by the end of it, was there like a mean average that you got to every day, or was it just wildly different?
I didn't count words, but you know, that came back to bite me a little because I think the highest word count of the draft was like 126,000. And Salma, who's also your editor, who is very loving, was just like, we should cut it a little. I was like, okay, and of course, because of course she was right. So I didn't really do word counts, but I did do the time, right? That's like a couple of hours. And if I got stuck, I would just kind of jump around, you know, like this scene is really hard and I don't quite know how to end this. So there's something I do want to write about. So let me write about that. So I think most days it felt fruitful. But also, you know, I was kind of writing a novel that I didn't feel a lot of pressure to finish. And so it actually kind of felt freeing because I felt like I could just do what I want, you know?
Right. Be around with it. It's more fun. You can explore, right? You can get creative with it.
Yeah. So speaking of which, I love these women that you've made, right? I just want to talk about representations of Muslim women who are very different from each other. I feel like, you know, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but when I am creating Black women on the page, that's deliberate for me. That's a deliberate act, right? And I have very clear ideas about the kinds of women I want them to be, the ways that I want them to talk to and talk back to, and sometimes talk against these sort of larger notions of who they should be. So I would love to talk about that. Like, how did you make these women, and what were you thinking about in terms of the potential cultural work that happens when you put groups that are often marginalized on the page and you just let them be their full, messy, complicated selves? There's so many moments when I was like, Keith, no! What are you doing?
Right.
And I love that. I love characters who make me angry. And I do. I love a messy character. I don't like neatness. I don't like people who are too good, because then I'm like, well, I'm terrible sometimes. I can't relate. So tell me about
true, right? It's just not true because when no one's that good.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So talk about that.
Well, I think what you just said there was really beautiful, actually, about being really intentional when you're writing Black women. And I think that comes down to, and I know it does for me as well, is you are that intentional when you have not seen yourself on the page. When you have not found yourself in literature or in popular culture outside of a narrative that was not your own and was forced upon you, and is not true to the reality of that group of people, then of course, how could we not be intentional in writing those characters, right? It's like asking us to not breathe. We of course we couldn't. And for me, I immersed myself in literature. I'm such a literature bunny, right? I read like 9 books every week when I was a kid, and I would take 9 from the library and I would read 9, and then I would take them back the next Thursday and get another 9 out. You know, like I was that kid. And we didn't have a TV growing up, and so, you know, the bookshelf was my TV. And then I did a degree in literature, and then I did my postgrad in literature. And in all those years, Destiny, and all those hundreds of books I read, where was I? I was nowhere to be found. Me and my girlfriends were nowhere to be found. And I did my master's thesis. I did it on the representation of Muslims within literature in kind of the Western Hemisphere. And still, after a year, 12 months of research across the States, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, we are still nowhere to be found. How is that possible? Like, riddle me that, right? Riddle me the maths on that. And of course, we were to be found, but we always fit into three very separate, damning groups, right? That none of them were true to our lived experience. And so when these women came to me and I knew I wanted to write this story, and listen, I'm going to level with you. I was pissed off. It was born out of a lot of frustration and a lot of being angry at not seeing what I wanted to see in literature. And so when I was writing those women, that was intentional. And I think, and I'm sure you can speak on this as well, but when you're writing groups of people, like you said, that have been marginalized and who don't appear, there's also a responsibility there, because how are you going to portray these people? Because you know people from outside your community, the white gaze, the male gaze, the non-Muslim gaze, they are going to be putting this apart. And they are going to be looking for things that will have proven them right all of this time. And so you're really heavily aware of that as well. And I certainly was when I was writing this. I felt this incredible responsibility and this incredible rage at the same time, because I wanted these women to live. All of these women who existed in real life, by the way, who were in their thousands across many countries, but who never got to shine on a page. And so for me, it was and that's why I think it's so beautiful the way you put it about being really intentional when you're writing that. It was such an intentional process. And there were things in there that I just put down on the first draft, but I kind of knew I don't want that to go in the final draft, because I know some idiot is going to take it and use it as an example for why y'all are all bad, or why you're wrong, or why we were right all along about you. And so it is, I think it's a really great responsibility. And you're not going to make everyone happy, of course. But for me, I was true to the women that I've met, the women in my life, the journeys that they've been on, the things that I've seen, the conversations we have about all of our other girlfriends. You know, I was like, these women who have been pushed out, these are the women that I'm going to write, and I'm going to do it with a lot of purpose. And I can only hope, I don't know if I did it right, but all I can hope is that I stayed true to that vision. And hopefully there are women who read it and go, oh, there I am after all of these years.
Yes. Yes to all of that. Goodness. So what were you mentioned that you felt like previous representations were sort of in just three groups. What are the three groups?
So number one, the Orientalists. So think Aladdin, right? Like any Muslim woman lives in the desert, and she is inevitably the sixth wife of the Sultan. Maybe she has a flying carpet. And then the second group was, that title trope that we all know about, but the terrorists that, they're gonna blow something up inevitably, and they have these really ill intentions. And then the third one, which might be like the most annoying, by the way, is the emancipated Muslim who has come to the West from the Far East and has been emancipated and freed from the shackles of an oppressive religion. And that's all I found. Someone was freeing us, someone was, binding us or oppressing us, or we were going to kill people. Which really, when you're just growing up and you're being a kid and doing all the things that you do as a kid or as a young woman, that's obviously pretty shitty to read every single day, And I remember finishing these books and then looking at my girlfriends and thinking, but wait, that's none of us. Like, none of us fit into that. Of course we don't. We live in England. We all go out and either get drunk or go home and have sex with people that we may or may not never see again. And then like the next day we'll all meet up at mosque and like really love our religion and fight for our faith and our culture. And we're really enriched by all of those things. And the fact that we get to to have a foot in both worlds is just a massive privilege that enriches our lives, as opposed to something that we're constantly fighting against. And so I just wanted to write a story in which Muslim women existed, dealing with all the things that you and I deal with, Destiny, even though we're from separate places in the world and separate backgrounds, all the things that all of our listeners who are tuned in right now, all the things that they deal with, work ambitions, family stresses, you know, trying to belong somewhere, trying to fall in love, trying to maintain love, falling out of love, being heartbroken, all the things that women deal with. I wanted these women to deal with those things. And the fact that they happened to be Muslim was just like a side note. And it wasn't the reason they were in the story, right? They just so happened to be there.
Yes, I completely agree. That is what I wanted to do with Nobody's Magic. I feel like sometimes when you have these identities that really loom large in like the psyche of the gays, right? Like sometimes the presumption is that this part of your identity is like all of who you are, right? If you're Muslim, if you have albinism, if you are Black, right? That like, that is just like, that is the one thing that defines everything about you. And I love that it's not like the worst thing that's ever happened to these women to be Muslim. It's also not necessarily the thing that constricts their lives. They make decisions that go against their parents' wishes and the wishes of their communities. And I really loved that. And I appreciate characters who offer that kind of complexity and kind of break those, like, you know, little boxes, the 3 boxes that you mentioned. So
right, because that's all of us, isn't it? You know, we can, regardless of what the expectations placed upon us and whether they're from family, community, friends, relationships, you know, life doesn't work like that. We don't all go, okay, so we're going to follow the rules and then we'll die happily. That's it. You know, like, when does that work as a narrative? Like, it just doesn't. And even
I don't think it's ever worked.
Right. And even people I think who would claim to follow that and be like, well, I follow by the book and by the rules, and I don't push against boundaries. I think that's a lie also, by the way.
Yeah, it's interesting. So no spoilers, but there's a conversation between Jenna and her mother, and, you know, she's sort of like, what? Wait, nobody's doing this? So we'll leave out the particulars of that, of this. But yeah, I think that was a lovely moment when she sort of comes to the realization that the thing that she's been trying to model actually did not exist, you know, in the generation before her. So
right, and it's all just a myth. And I think a lot of our social expectations are that, you know, we place it on women all the time. You need to grow up and be educated, and then you need to be married, and then you need to have babies, and you obviously have moved to the suburbs, and like, this is what you should do, and that's it, and it will fulfill you, and it will be everything. But all of these things are just these mirages, because actually you can do all those steps and you can attain all of those things society wants from you, and it's not necessarily going to make you happy, and it's not necessarily going to give you what they promised it would, right? And in society, we do that so much, don't we? We're always aiming for something or trying to get something that we were told would make us happy, but actually, is it even real?
Yeah. And then also that will keep us safe, which I think is a thing that's really true for minority communities, right? It's like, if you aspire to this certain kind of respectability, then you're safer out there with them. And that's not true either, right? Like, and I know it's advice given with good intentions, but it's so harmful. And I think your book does, I think your book does a great job of like unpacking some of that harm, you know? Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So you mentioned Aladdin, and I also wanted to talk about representations of Muslim men, because I was reading and I was like, somewhere there is a man who means well, but he's really upset by this. Or maybe he doesn't mean well. I don't know how they think.
Yeah, I was going to say, maybe he doesn't mean that well. There's plenty of those guys on the internet. They probably have like podcasts. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. They're up in arms, though. They're angry. This is unfair. So that's because one of the characters mentions, like, is it the Aladdin complex, or there's yeah. And so I wanted to talk about that because I'm interested. I'm also, because I write a lot about love and love across genders, love intragender love, all of that. I'm just always interested too in representations of the other half of the equation, right? So I would love to talk about that too. The men.
Yeah. And you know what? I'd be so interested as well in how you represent the other half of that equation as well. And you know what? It's funny because in my opinion, right? And anyone who's read the book and who's tuned in now may have a different opinion. But in my opinion, in the book, the best character is a man and the worst character is a man, right? And, both Muslim men, the best and the worst, right? And I've had a few conversations already about the representation of the Muslim men in this book. And like you said, there's some maybe well-meaning man on the internet somewhere with a podcast and a microphone who's up in arms about it, right? And I just think, Destiny, let me tell you what I think about this, isn't it such a reflection of where we're really at in our society that I can write a book that puts Muslim women on the page in a way that they have never been on the page, and a way that has allowed them to live, because those Muslim women have been ignored and marginalized and pushed out for decades, right? For decades. And I can write that book because I finally want to see those women on the page. And yet someone's going to be upset that the men aren't represented well enough. And please tell me, in all of literature, when Byron was writing or Shakespeare was writing, Dickens was writing, any of those people that we put in the canon and we deem like great literature, when did we ever go to them and say, I don't think you've represented the women fully? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah. It's a privilege to like demand to be centered in a space that was never intended for you to be
right?
centered. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's exactly it. I'm like,
you're right.
This ain't about you. And these women have been ignored for decades. But now that they're finally getting like a tiny bit of airtime, you want to come and be like, but where am I? Well, you've been everywhere since the beginning of time. So take the bench. Why? I just find it really curious that people would ask that to me, as if I have this obligation to men who never felt they had an obligation to represent women or women of color or Black women fully. They were perfectly happy for the women to be, I don't know, like read any Sebastian Faulks novel, right? I'm not saying Sebastian Faulks not a good writer. Birdsong, great, lovely. But like all the women are there for his male characters to have sex with. Do you know what I mean? And I'm like, this is not about you. And it like, I don't owe men anything. And I don't owe the characters to be these like 3-dimensional, really fleshed out. Do you know what I mean? I don't know. Maybe that's me being harsh, but.
Well, I think they actually are. Like, I think that they are complex and I think Ali's trajectory over the course of the novel is really interesting. He comes in one way and he goes out another. I didn't see that coming.
That's such a good way of putting it. Yeah.
And so is Kisa's father, who I'm going to give it away, but when you said there was a best and the worst, I thought of those two. But I think that is up. Right. That is up for debate on who's the best and the worst. But yeah, I think that they do sometimes do terrible things in the book. Like, yeah, of course. But again, like we were saying earlier, that is true to life and lived experience. And I think it's really, I think that, yes, there is a responsibility of portrayal. And I do feel that responsibility when I'm writing Black men, but it doesn't mean that I have to always make them good. I feel like my responsibility is to make them complex and interesting and human. And that runs the gamut of all kinds of things. They can be wonderful or they can be terrible. They can be both at different times, which I think is what happens in this book. So, I was thinking about that. Yeah, I was thinking about that, like somebody's mad. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, 100%. But I love the way you've put that, actually. Like, it's your responsibility to make them complex human characters. And past that, they'll go into the world as they will, right? And you can take from that what you want. But if you've kind of put a complex character on the page, and you've done your job.
Absolutely. I completely agree. Yeah. Yeah. So we've talked so much that I still have a bunch of questions left, but I only have a few minutes.
It's my fault. I have such long answers. I will be brief.
No, not at all. I love it when it's more organic and it's not just like a one word answer and then I'm like trying to scramble to fill the space. Yeah. So I think you've done wonderful. So the last question that I always like to ask is, I don't ask the question like, what are you working on next? But what I am interested in is, what are you doing right now creatively that excites you and brings you joy?
Do you know what? That will kind of answer both of those questions, because I have written the next book.
Hey.
I don't know the protocol for talking about your next book when you're doing promo for your first book, but I have written it, and now I'm kind of in the process of, and I don't know if you have this, but you put it all on the page and then you shape and sculpt, right? And make it a beautiful thing, hopefully. So creatively, I'm kind of in the very early stages of that and kind of playing with the storyline and maybe changing it and maybe like fleshing this bit out, and maybe I'm going to delete that scene and maybe I'm going to put a new scene in. So I'm in that process, which is really fascinating to me, because this next novel is spoiler, shock horror, about a group of women. And I'm so excited about this because I'm just obsessed with the lives of women. Like, I'm so curious and I adore them and I want to know everything, the gritty, the raw, the beautiful, the mundane, the glorious. I just am obsessed with the lives of women, and their stories are incredible and fascinating. And so the creativity, I'm excited about that. That's what's kind of got my juices flowing, if you will.
I love it. I'm excited. Yeah. And yeah, write your obsessions. I love the idea of like going back to women, going back to those stories that don't get told. So I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you so much.
Definitely. I'm one of those guys with a podcast, and I hate that about myself. No, I'm not like one of those guys, but like I am a guy with a podcast, and that's like my least favorite part about myself. But I interview authors outside of working for the bookstore. And
you know what? There's other guys with podcasts.
Yeah, no, I know.
Have given you a bad rep for
no,
sure.
I know. But I think it was like last year I had a string of like 6 women of color on the podcast, like authors. And I got a DM from some troll, like, why do you hate men? And I was like, what? It's like, people are coming for me. I can't imagine like the crap you both have to go through with trolls on the internet, or people who think they, anyway. Before I get to audience questions, I want to ask about, you were both talking about like body movement and generating ideas before we started recording. I'd love for you just kind of like talk about that. Like, how do you get your juices flowing? That's my audience question. And I get to do that because I have the mic. So
yeah, go ahead, Destiny. I loved what you said about it.
Well, there are a number of things that I'll do to sort of get started with writing. Journaling for me is exponentially helpful because it's very low stakes writing. No one will ever see it. I will burn it before it reaches the archive, because nobody needs to know who gets on my nerves and all that stuff.
I want to read it now. That's all I now want from you.
One of my friends is like, well, not so fast. You can always just take certain parts out, and that's always like good fodder for creative work. So journaling really helps. And we were talking about grounding oneself in the reality of the moment, especially as writers, and as your book sort of goes out into the world and people react to it, and they tell you their stories, or like all of the things that come with this very private thing now becoming a very public thing. So I've been doing a lot of walking. Yoga really helps. And for me, generating ideas, like walking with friends. I was hiking a couple of weeks ago and I was telling a friend about this short story that I've been thinking about. And I was like, oh, I've been thinking way more about this than I thought, because I had so much to say. And I was like, I didn't even know that that was all in there. So yeah, so that's helpful for me. When I'm ready to sort of sit down and like get down to the nitty gritty, I do sit, and I have to be very warm. And I have to feel very safe. So, and I'm a person, I don't do coffee shop writing. I can't, it has to be very quiet. So I often write at home and I'm surrounded by things that I can look at, things that I can touch. Like even right now, I'm sitting under a blanket. Because it just that makes me feel held, and I like to be held when I'm doing this work because it's important, and sometimes it's painful, and there are all kinds of things that come up when you're writing. So that's my process.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I love that idea. And I so resonate that with like of being safe and being held, because you're doing hard work and actually you deserve to be in a very safe space. Also the same, there is no coffee shop writing for me. It's not happening, not in a million years, because now I'm like pissed off at the awful conversation that I'm having to listen to on my right. And then like some teenagers come in and I just think, stop, I beg, stop talking about whatever it is. And then you're like tuned in and then someone's having an argument with the barista. No, it's like my worst nightmare. And I also find it really, really difficult to write when there is another person's energy in my space. So even if someone was like, if I was in my house and someone was sitting quietly at the other end of the table, I would be like, you're screaming. I can hear everything coming from your body. Please leave the premises immediately. I don't even like to have someone in the house when I'm writing. I need that. No, we're not doing like co-writing sessions together. It also makes me sound really miserable. But what I will say is the things that you were saying really resonate about moving your body. And for me, I'm also a great walker. I like to walk a lot, and whether it's up mountains for like long hikes at days at a time, or whether it's just down by the river or wherever it is in my local area through the park, I really believe that moving your body will make your mind move too. And if you're stuck in your mind, or you're stuck with a chapter, or you're stuck with something, go walk it out. Let your body move and your mind will move with you. I'm also, by the way, insanely jealous of the journaling, can I just say, because I always think it's so cool when someone's like, I journal, and I'm like, amazing. And when you're centuries on, someone's going to find your journals and it's going to be incredible. And I want to be that person who sounds so cool and says, yes, I journal, but it's like my worst nightmare. I can't think of anything worse.
Well, it's actually it wasn't even for creative practice. It was from my therapist. It was 3 pages in the morning. Yeah, it's the 3 pages in the morning to sort of get the negative thoughts out before the day begins. And it kind of morphed into something else. So yeah,
amazing.
it works.
Listen, Destiny, my therapist also told me to journal. I did not listen.
Of course. Well, I can testify that it works. I was also like, I don't know if I want to do that, because writing that felt useless didn't make sense to me. Right. And the truth is that it's not. But it just felt like, well, if I'm not showing this to other people, but it's nice to have the safe space, because I don't ever have to. And that actually makes me feel a little freer to sort of say what I want, which is why I will burn them.
I'm going to make it my last mission to read one of them. I will sign an NDA if you need me to.
And then a question from the audience. Kelly wants to know, have you read books recently that you feel like you've connected with characters that like represent you, like more recently, like in publication in the past few years?
No, is the answer. I've read books about women that I find incredible and amazing, and I resonate with those women, but I don't ever get to read characters about Muslim women and then be in the story or be a central character because of, I don't know, the dream and ambition that they have, and not the fact that they are being forced to marry someone because they're Muslim or some BS like that. No, I still haven't. So if anyone has any recommendations, like I think the last book that I read that had a Muslim female character was something to do with honor in the title, and that will tell you everything about it.
Destiny, how about you? Are you connecting with any characters that like you feel a kinship to?
Well, similar to Salma, like I didn't see myself in literature very often. The some of the last books I read that had characters with albinism in them were really terrible depictions, or they were just these references of like these taboos. Like your one novel in particular, like there are two characters about to have sex in the daytime. And they're like, oh, you can't do that because then you'll have one of those children. So unfortunately, no, not in that specific
Yeah.
demographic, but gosh, women I have loved recently. I actually just finished reading a book that also came out this week called Woman of Light
Mm.
by Kali Fahadl Anstein. Oh wait, she had an event at Tattered Cover, right?
Yeah, she's
They,
a Denverite, so she had a 2 night book launch. They both sold out. But yeah, Woman of Light's gorgeous.
amazing.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. I loved the women in that book, right? I mean, they were Chicana, they weren't Black women. It was a different time period. But again, they were, like Salma's characters, they were fully fleshed out and they did things that made you want to yell at them. And but they also deeply loved their families and they were integral parts of their communities. And those are the kinds of characters that I just really enjoy. But no, I don't often see myself, and that's why I wrote my book because I
Mhm.
wanted, yeah, I want another Black woman with albinism to open the book and say, I may not be like these women, I may not live like these women, but I see myself. Yeah, so.
Definitely. And that rolls into another audience question. Anna asks, what books have you just been enjoying? So Destiny, you said One of the Light. Salma, maybe they're not women that you connect with, but are there books that you've been able to read recently?
Yeah, well, I suppose anything by Lisa Tadeo I'm pretty obsessed with.
Mhm.
And her new book actually just arrived the other day, and I'm so excited to get into it. But her book Animal, her novel Animal, and her book Three Women, I just think there isn't, I don't know, the way Lisa Tadeo writes about womanhood with such raw, gritty filth about it, I really enjoy. So yeah, anything by Lisa Tadeo, I am diving in.
Definitely. And then just wrapping up, going into you. So you both mentioned non-coffee shop writing. What is like the ideal writing day? Where are you? Are you listening to music? Are you writing just whatever sticks, or do you have a plan? What is it like when you sit down every day for both of you?
Oh, good question. I'm gonna let you go on that.
I was hoping you went first, but okay. um, um, so someone once told me that you get about 4 good hours of writing time a day. And you can work longer than that, but the quality of what you produce goes down. I don't know if that's true, but I ran with it because it was 4 hours instead of 8. So I was like, cool. So I try to keep it down to like it sort of heavy days. So like when I was writing Nobody's Magic, I was also working on my book of poetry that was getting ready to come out. And so I would kind of like divvy up my day. Like that 4 hours, I would spend a couple of hours on Nobody's Magic. I might spend an hour doing poetry. I might spend an hour just doing something else, research, reading other stuff. You know, free writing, just some other activity that didn't necessarily involve like producing pages that would be in the book. So that's a successful day for me content wise. But again, it's also a day I'm increasingly becoming more invested with my own like physical health. So I want to sit for 4 hours and write. I am sitting when that happens, but then later I would love to take a walk, or I would love to do yoga, or I would love to cook a meal because I'm still thinking about things as I'm doing those things, but I'm not in the pressure cooker of the writing space. And actually that can be really useful for me. One of the storylines for Nobody's Magic came to me while I was in the kitchen cooking, and I was like I was frying something. I was like looking down into the skillet, and a little voice was like, "The mom's supposed to be dead," and I was like, "No," but it was it was the best decision I ever made. I think that what happens in that story couldn't have been possible if the character had still been there, like in the present. So So a day that involves, a chunk of writing time, but also time to do other things and to just let my brain breathe and like come up with really cool things if it wants to, or just watch Euphoria if I want to. And I love consuming other kinds of art. I really do love music. I cannot listen to it while I'm writing. It has to be really quiet. And like you, Salma, I have to be alone. So listening to other music, talking to my friends about art, watching television. I've gotten back into watching documentaries, which I really love, and just feeding my brain with other things and moving around.
I think we have very similar styles because there is no music happening when I am writing. It's very, very rare for me to write a scene with music because then the music is in my head and it's taking my brain away from me and it's taking it elsewhere when my brain needs to stay with me for these moments. And there is nobody around. Even when I've closed my laptop for the day, I still don't want anyone around. I want, like when I was writing my second book, I wrote it in January and I took myself to a different country for like 3 weeks to write it. Like I don't need to finish work, and it does sound really selfish. I don't want to finish my work and then find out about your day. I don't. Just keep that elsewhere. Because you're in because what it is, and Destiny, I'm sure you'll know this so keenly, when you are producing a novel, a body of work that big that has to sustain, and you said you sent it to Salma, our editor, and it was like 120,000, right? I sent my novel, These Impossible Things, I sent it and it was 170,000, the final draft, the first draft when we first did it, and we whittled it down to like 120. When you are creating a body of work that is that extensive, you are outputting so much energy a day. Your energy output is insane. Like I look back to the time I was writing These Impossible Things and I was doing 5,000 words a day, and I feel genuinely nauseous. Like I feel sick to my stomach to think about the output that I put out in that month and the energy that I expended and how much work was required to get it out. So I need to just be alone, and I don't need to be with anyone. I don't need to be worrying about anyone. I will sit. I will not leave that desk until I have done the words that I need to do. I don't pick up my phone. My phone is out of sight. I can't even see my phone because I don't even want to see all that energy from the outside world coming in. And not that I'm tempted, right? I could leave my phone in front of me and not pick it up all day. I don't want to see it. I don't even want it in my line of sight. And then once I've finished, I will cook a meal, like you said, probably something super easy because I hate cooking, and maybe like beans on toast, which I know Americans are horrified about. And and it'll be easy.
I am.
Yeah, see,
I'm sorry.
I don't know. Listen, I know it's gross. I'm not advocating for it, but I'm going to eat it. I'm not making like anything fancy, but something super easy. And then I'll watch something, right? So I'll watch something super trashy. I can't watch a documentary. I can't watch anything that's high art or that's going to like have my brain spinning out somewhere else. I'll just watch something that's quite, okay, my brain will now switch off, and like a Nicholas Sparks film, okay, something like of that ilk, right? Easy, done. There's a formula, bam, it's over. And I can't read anyone's work. I can't read anything when I'm writing because, again, when you're in that creative space, and I'm sure Destiny, you can speak on this as well. You are in such a vulnerable state where anything could be absorbed into you. I find that, and I have to protect that space quite fiercely. And so there's no writing there's no reading of anybody's work. So it's quite a boring time actually, but I mean, it does the job.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm the same way. I can't read when I'm working on things. I start to get performance anxiety. I'm like, this other person's doing it this way and I don't want to do it that way. So yeah. I totally feel you. And yeah, there was a moment where someone was eating beans on toast in the book and I was like,
you're like, these Brits, oh God, how did they ever rule anything?
I've never tried it though, so maybe I should try it.
When you come to London, I'm gonna sort you out. I'm gonna make it for you, and then you'll probably still be disgusted. I always put hot sauce in my beans, but I'm not gonna make you do that.
I love hot sauce.
Okay, yes. Fine. I've got the best hot sauce for it. Hot sauce in the beans, melted cheese on top. It's beautiful. And you know what? I have it with a bagel. So we're mixing up cultures. It'll be fine.
I love it. I'm down.
Well, thank you both so much for this amazing conversation. Everyone out there in the virtual world, you can get both their books at tattercover.com. I always like to end with, where can we connect with you on the internet? Do you like social media? Do you want us to email you through your site? How do we find both of you?
Send a pigeon. I'm on all the socials. Yes, you can slide in the DMs respectfully.
Same. I am at Instagram. On Instagram, I am at bird_song of the year. And then on Twitter, which I use less frequently, I'm at Destiny O'Shea. And also, if you want to read stuff, I'm at destinybirdsong.com. So amazing. Any of those places works.
Amazing.
Terrific. Well, everyone out there in the virtual world, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Salma and Destiny, thank you for talking so much about your books and your just writing and everything. I always love to sit in on these conversations. It's the best part of my job. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I'm so pleased. And Destiny, you are a dream. Thank you.
Oh, it's been such a pleasure.